I left quietly the day I discovered my wife's affair. I didn't scream, argue, or demand explanations. I just walked away. A year later, she came searching for me, begging for forgiveness, pleading for a second chance. Back in February 2018, after 3.5 years of marriage, my world shattered when I uncovered Clara's betrayal. At the time, I was working a contract job that often required travel, but it also allowed me to work from home whenever I was available. I had spent almost 3 years as the director of a small yet thriving technical sales company, a job that kept me engaged and provided a sense of stability. Meanwhile, my wife, Clara, was excelling in her career at a prestigious law firm. She was intelligent, ambitious, and undeniably beautiful, qualities that had drawn me to her in the first place. To outsiders, we seemed like the perfect couple. Our friends envied our success. Our families admired the life we had built together. We were the golden couple, respected, accomplished, and seemingly unshakable. But behind closed doors, cracks had started to form long before I even realized it. In the beginning, everything was blissful. Our wedding, just 3 years prior, still felt like a dream. I can still picture that day, the sun casting a golden glow, Clara's laughter ringing in the air, the overwhelming sense that we were stepping into something extraordinary. We were more than husband and wife. We were best friends, partners, lovers. I supported her ambitions, and she championed mine. Our weekends were spent hiking scenic trails, enjoying quiet dinners, and embarking on spontaneous adventures. We had been that couple, the one others admired, the one people looked at and thought, they've got it all figured out. But over time, something changed. The shift was subtle at first, so subtle that I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment it began. My job kept me on the road, pulling me away for weeks at a time. I spent long nights in sterile hotel rooms, attending meetings, closing deals, chasing success. It was thrilling in its own way, fast-paced and rewarding, but it came at a cost. The distance between Clara and me grew, not just in miles, but in ways that were harder to measure. Clara was thriving in her own right. Her career flourished, and we had built a comfortable life together. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being us. Looking back, the signs were there all along, small, seemingly insignificant details that I brushed off as part of normal life. The late nights at the office, the quiet dinners where the only sound was the hum of the television, the brief distant conversations whenever I returned home. At the time, I told myself it was just the natural ebb and flow of a busy marriage. We're both focused on our careers. This is just a phase, but it wasn't a phase. It was the unraveling of everything we had built. Clara became increasingly elusive. When I was away on business trips, I'd call her, but sometimes she wouldn't answer. Other times she'd pick up but sound distant, distracted, like she had one foot in another world. And when I came home, I could feel the shift. She was withdrawn, her mood unpredictable. Conversations turned into quick exchanges, mechanical, polite, but empty. The warmth, the intimacy, the effortless connection we once shared had faded into something cold and unfamiliar. I should have known. I should have seen it for what it was. The turning point came in early February, after I returned from a trip to San Francisco. It had been a grueling few days. Back-to-back meetings, late nights with clients, endless hotel room meals. I was drained, physically and emotionally, and all I wanted was to come home, see Clara, and just be with her. But when I walked through the front door, something felt off. The house was eerily still, empty in a way that sent a chill through me. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages, just a familiar note left on the kitchen counter. Working late. Don't wait up. That wasn't unusual, but for some reason, this time, it didn't sit right. There was an unease in my chest that I couldn't shake. Upstairs, I began unpacking, trying to push the doubt from my mind. But then I saw it. A small slip of paper peeking out from under a stack of clothes in my drawer. At first, I thought it was just an old receipt, something insignificant. But when I pulled it out and looked closer, my breath caught in my throat. It was a hotel receipt, dated last weekend. Clara had been in a hotel. But I had been out of town. A sickening feeling settled in my gut. My hands trembled as I stared at the paper, my mind racing with the possibilities I had been too afraid to acknowledge. Who was she there with? Panic surged through me as I grabbed her phone, my heart pounding harder with every swipe. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to find what I already knew deep down. But I had to. And then, there it was. The messages, the photos, the plans. It wasn't just a meaningless fling. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was an ongoing, carefully hidden affair. And in that moment, I realized the life I thought we had was nothing but an illusion. She had been with someone from her office, a colleague, someone I had probably met, shaken hands with, maybe even shared a casual conversation with. A flood of emotions hit me all at once: anger, disbelief, and a deep, gut-wrenching sadness unlike anything I had ever felt before. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we had built together? My grip tightened around the phone as the weight of it all sank in. The ground beneath me felt unsteady, as if the very foundation of my life had crumbled in an instant. My wife, the woman I had loved for years, the woman I had built a future with, she had been living a lie, and I had been blind to it. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. The pain was suffocating. That night, when Clara walked through the door, I didn't confront her immediately. I needed time. Time to process what I had just uncovered, to gather the words that I wasn't sure I would even be able to say. But the moment she saw my face, her smile faded. She knew. She knew that I knew. I didn't speak. I simply handed her the phone. She took it hesitantly, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the messages, her face paling with each passing second. Guilt flickered in her eyes, fear settling into the space between us. "It's not what you think," she whispered, her voice weak and unsteady. I made a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you." Her words felt hollow, meaningless. The damage had already been done. Nothing she could say would erase what I had seen. I couldn't listen to her apologies. I couldn't sit through her excuses. I turned away. That night, I packed a small bag, grabbed my keys, and walked out. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I needed to get away from her, away from the house that now felt foreign, suffocating, poisoned by her betrayal. I drove for hours, letting the road stretch endlessly ahead of me. I wasn't running, not exactly. I just couldn't stay. Eventually, I found myself in the hills, a place I had always gone to clear my head. The isolation was what I needed, the quiet, the stillness, a sanctuary away from the chaos of my unraveling life. I ended up at an old cabin I had rented years ago. It wasn't meant to be a permanent retreat, just a place to breathe, to think. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized I couldn't go back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The overwhelming emotions consumed me: grief, rage, confusion. I spent my days walking through the dense forest, my thoughts looping in endless circles. The chirping birds and rustling leaves were the only sounds that didn't feel like a cruel reminder of everything I had lost. Every evening I sat by the fire, staring into the flames, replaying the past. How had it come to this? How had I missed the signs? I thought about the way we used to be, our laughter, our late-night talks, the dreams we had built together. It felt like another lifetime. And now, the betrayal felt like a story separate from the life I had once lived. A bitter ending to something I had believed would last forever. The cold reality of what had happened settled over me like a heavy weight. I replayed the confrontation in my mind over and over again. Clara's eyes, wide with fear and guilt, haunted me. But it wasn't just that look of fear that lingered in my thoughts. It was the look of resignation. The moment when she admitted what she had done, as if she already knew, deep down, that there was no going back. Her actions had severed the bond between us in a way that no words could ever repair. The first few days in the cabin were quiet, almost peaceful. The isolation was what I needed, the space to breathe and try to gather my shattered thoughts. But slowly the pain began to sink in. Each morning I woke with a pit in my stomach, the hollow ache of knowing that everything had changed. My life, our life, had been irrevocably altered, and I didn't know how to process it. The anger that had once burned so fiercely faded, leaving only a deep, aching sadness. And beneath that sadness, there was a longing for the life I thought I still had, for the future that had once seemed so certain. The vision of us, together, forever, now felt like a cruel joke. I wasn't just alone in the physical sense, I was alone in the emotional sense too. Clara wasn't just absent from the cabin, she was absent from my life, from the world we had built together. I don't know why I stayed at the cabin for as long as I did. Perhaps I needed to heal, or maybe the distance allowed me to think more clearly. But every so often, memories of Clara would creep into my mind. I remembered her laughter, her smile, the way she would curl up beside me at night. I miss those moments, even knowing that they could never be reclaimed. It was as if I was mourning the loss of the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had loved with all my heart. Eventually, time began to dull the edges of the pain. I started focusing on myself, on what I needed to do to rebuild my life. I took up running again, something I hadn't done in years. The miles seemed to ease the tension in my body, and for brief moments, I could forget about everything that had happened. I read books, wrote in my journal, spent more time outside, appreciating the simple things. The cabin was quiet, peaceful, everything I needed to regain some sense of control. And then, after a month of solitude, I got the call. It was Clara. Her voice was hesitant, uncertain, a stark contrast to the confident woman I had once known. She apologized again, just like she had the night of our confrontation, but this time, there was something different in her voice, a vulnerability I hadn't heard before. She was no longer the woman who had turned her back on me. She was the woman who seemed to have finally come to terms with what she had done. She told me that she missed me, that she had spent every day since our separation trying to figure out where everything had gone wrong. She admitted the affair had been a mistake, a moment of weakness, and that she regretted it deeply. "I know I hurt you," she said, her voice trembling, "but I love you. I want to make this right. Please, give me a chance to show you that I can be the woman you thought I was. I can't lose you." I listened in silence. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to hang up, to close this chapter of my life and never look back. I wanted to move on, to leave her behind and never look back, but another part of me, the part that still cared, still loved her, couldn't ignore the pull. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive her. I didn't know if I ever would be. But a part of me wanted to believe that we could start over, that she could prove herself worthy of my trust again. "I need time," I finally said, my voice thick with emotion. "I need time to think." We spoke for a few more minutes before I ended the call. I didn't know what to think. I wasn't ready to make any decisions, but I couldn't just dismiss her entirely either. Over the next few weeks, I tried to push her out of my mind. I focused on work, on rebuilding my life, trying to find some semblance of normalcy. But Clara's words echoed in my head. She loved me. She wanted a second chance. And part of me still wanted to believe her. But the question still gnawed at me. Could I ever trust her again? Could I truly forgive her for what she had done? The affair wasn't just a betrayal, it was a violation of everything I had believed in. And then, one day, as I was lost in thought, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting her. It had been weeks since our last conversation, and I had convinced myself that she would never come back. But there she was, standing on the doorstep, looking small, vulnerable. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she wore a simple coat. The same one she had worn during the early days of our relationship. Her eyes were red from crying, her cheeks pale. "I had to see you," she said softly, her voice cracking. "I couldn't stay away. Please, let me explain everything. Let me show you how sorry I am." I stood frozen, not knowing what to do. Part of me wanted to shut the door, to end it all right then and there. But another part of me, the part I couldn't ignore, wanted to hear her out. Maybe it was foolish, maybe it was a mistake. But I let her in. The importance of communication. One of the key themes could be how the lack of open communication between partners led to the breakdown of their marriage. The protagonist could reflect on how both he and Clara were so consumed with their careers that they neglected to nurture their relationship. This lesson would emphasize the importance of maintaining a balance between work and personal life and making time for the people who matter most. Self-discovery and healing. After the affair, the protagonist spent time alone in the cabin, reflecting on his life and what he wanted for his future. The lesson could focus on how moments of pain and betrayal, while devastating, can also lead to self-discovery and growth. The protagonist could realize that healing comes from within, and he now has a better understanding of his needs, boundaries, and what it means to truly love and respect oneself. Trust and forgiveness. The story could highlight the complexity of forgiveness and whether it's always possible or healthy to restore a relationship after betrayal. The protagonist could learn that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or condoning the actions, but it's about finding peace for himself. He might reflect that trust takes years to build, but only moments to destroy, and it requires deep introspection to decide if it can ever be rebuilt. Boundaries and self-worth. The protagonist could learn the importance of setting clear boundaries in relationships.